Cowboys rookie running back, meanwhile, Ezekiel Elliott has been a standout this season, going for a career-high 157 rushing yards this Sunday and helping Dallas get to a 5-1 record. Zeke has impressed his teammate Des Bryant, who told the Fort Worth Star-Telegram he predicts Elliott will rush for 2,000 or more yards this season. So where does Elliott's awesome start rank in NFL history? He's off to the second best start ever through 6 games in terms of rushing yards, behind only Eric Dickerson. Wow. Stephen A. I'll start with you, Max. Can Zeke get to 2,000 yards?
He can. To start this season, before this season started, Ezekiel Elliott was the choice of many as the #1 overall fantasy pick.
Yep.
#1 overall in your fantasy draft. If you go first, take Ezekiel Elliott. Why? Because he was a stud in college. Because he is fast, like his 40 time is fast. Even his, it's not always zigzagging, but boy, he can hit a hole. And because the Dallas Cowboys have not only the best offensive line in the game, but they plan to use it. The plan coming into this season, even with Romo as quarterback, was they're going to hand the ball to Ezekiel Elliott more than any team is going to hand the ball to their running back. And unlike a team like Los Angeles, where they're just going to stack the box against Gurley because they have no other offense. In fact, there are some other offensive weapons on Dallas. They're going to have to play Dallas a little more honestly. So everyone knew Ezekiel Elliott was going to eat this season, which is why not getting off to the fastest start the first couple games, people like me were like, whoa. The game plan is to give him the ball. They're giving it to him. The offensive line is amazing, and he's still not racking up the yards. He needs about 120 yards a game the rest of the way to get to 2,000 yards. It's been done before, after all. And I absolutely think he can get it. If you look at these holes the offensive line is opening for him, Stephen A., they're sometimes not touching him for 8 or 10 yards. It's not like he's breaking tackles. He's going through wide open holes with breakaway speed. He can get it.
He's got 2 games against the Eagles coming up. He's got a game against the Baltimore Ravens coming up. He's got a game against the Minnesota Vikings coming up. He's got a game against the Giants coming up. And Detroit and Tampa. I'm quite sure he'll have a few hundred more yard-plus games. I'm quite sure he's going to get close to 300 carries because DeMarco Murray in his 1,845-yard season had 292 carries. He ain't getting 2,000 yards. It's not going to happen. Because somehow, some way, again, y'all don't understand who the Cowboys are and how they're going to mess things up. It's easy to give him the ball that much now because Des Bryant's not there, okay, and Tony Romo is not back. You don't have questions and trepidation about that. Remember, it don't matter who you start if all you're going to do is hand the ball over to Ezekiel Elliott. But when you have to worry about that, okay, that's an issue. So Dak is going to be in a mood to prove himself, and they're having more and more faith in him and letting him venture out and take more risk and do more things. Then you've got Des Bryant and his imminent return. You still got Jason Witten and Cole Beasley to get the ball to. You have Darren McFadden ultimately coming back with Alfred Morris already there, even though Alfred Morris only got like 33 carries and Ezekiel Elliott already has 137. You got to be concerned about the fact that even though he's a rookie, he's a 4th overall pick in the 1st round. You're going to want to be cognizant and protective of him. So all of those elements that come into the equation are going to dissipate the number of touches to some degree. It's going to interfere with what they've been doing over the first 6 games. And as a result, that's going to get in the way. I'm not saying he couldn't, meaning he doesn't have the ability to pull it off, because he clearly does, particularly behind that offensive line. But one of those elements, if not a multitude of them, will come into play, which will prevent him from getting 2,000 yards.
I disagree. 2 reasons. 1, the most impressive thing about the Dallas Cowboys this year, and you hear analysts say this, and sometimes it sounds like BS when you have nothing better to say, but sometimes it applies. The team doesn't know what it is, who they are. They don't have their identity. Dallas has its identity. It is a time of possession, ball control offense. You do that by running the ball. You know, you don't do that by taking shots down the field constantly. You do that by handing it to a dominant back behind an excellent offensive line and with a quarterback that's not going to turn the ball over. That's exactly who Dallas is. That's how they're having their success. And furthermore, that's just the execution of the game plan heading into the season. This is who they wanted to be and planned to be, and now it's successful. That's 1. 2, in terms of being protective of the running back, You're not protective of your running back. Well, they spent a high draft pick on him. What you want to do with a running back is use him up before you have to pay him. Right now, you don't really have to pay him. And running backs, the shelf life is they start to kind of fall off at 28 by 30. They're just not the same. Use them up now.
We only got a couple of seconds left. I heard your point. Hear mine. Number one, you wanted to do that primarily to protect Tony Romo. You don't have such concerns with Dak Prescott. Okay, you have to look at it from that perspective. And I think that absolutely cannot be ignored. And number two, you would be right about Ezekiel Elliott, but keep in mind this point. What were the ingredients to their success as three-time Super Bowl champions? Yes, you had Emmitt Smith with a Michael Irvin, the playmaker, with a Hall of Famer and quarterback Troy Aikman. But the combination of the trio, it was a yin and a yang to it. It was a combination of going both ways. What you didn't do was give it to the young stud that was Emmitt Smith and said, we're going to run you into the ground. You wanted to be protective of him because you knew with him you could win Super Bowls for years to come. You ain't just chasing 1 year of glory. That is the difference. And that's why I said Ezekiel Elliott's going to get the ball. He's going to be successful. But 2,000 yards? Nah.
Bengals linebacker Vontaze Burfict already missed the first 3 games of the season thanks to a suspension for a helmet-to-helmet hit in last year's playoffs. So his actions in Sunday's game against the Patriots shows he may not have learned too much from that time off. The NFL is reviewing 2 plays from the game. The first, a low hit on Martellus Bennett. After the game, Bennett said Burfict did apologize to him and told him it wasn't intentional. And the second play, an alleged stomp on LeGarrette Blount after a late touchdown. So a decision on potential discipline for Burfict is expected no later than Wednesday afternoon, a league source telling ESPN. Stephen A., how should he be punished?
It will not happen in all likelihood because it's really difficult to define what level, whether or not this warrants a suspension because of the things that were transpiring and the visual that they have. Not only that, measuring intent. Remember, he went low, he didn't go high. So because of that, he probably won't end up getting suspended. It is my opinion, and I hate to say this, it's my opinion that Vontaze Burfict should be suspended at least a couple of games. I want to make sure that I'm clear about that, and I want to make sure that everybody understands I take no joy in saying that. This guy has had a very, very difficult upbringing. He's overcome a lot in his life. I'm quite sure he's a better person than he displays himself as being on the field because you don't hear too much about him off the field. I remember last year, Max, in the interest of full disclosure, Pac-Man Jones, who I've known for many years. I've interviewed him on several occasions. I'm very, very fond of Pac-Man Jones. I think he's overcome a lot himself, and he's a really good brother. He called, and the conversation that we had ain't suitable for FCC airwaves at how he was going off in defense of his guy, Vontaze Burfict. The only reason I'm letting you guys know about that conversation is because Pac-Man Jones never hid the fact that it was okay for me to expose that conversation because I would never do it otherwise. So he came to the defense of a Vontaze Burfict. But I would also tell you what I retorted. I retorted at the time the same thing I'm about to say now. Troy Vincent, VP Football Operations NFL. Derek Brooks, Appeals Officer. John Runyon, former congressman, former Philadelphia Eagle, who's now the VP for Policy and Rules Administration, who's the guy that will make that decision within the next day or so, along with a bevy of others, Merton Hanks and others. At one point in time or another in the career of Vontaze Burfict, I have spoken to these individuals. They have given him chance after chance after chance, okay? They have sat up there, I mean, as recently as a week ago, I had one of the dudes, you know, in the appeals department, talked about how Vontaze Burfict was reached out to. He has been called. He has been emailed. They have reached out to him. He won't return people's phone calls. He won't get back to them. And they still reached out to him to make sure he knew they were pleased with him. They were encouraged by him, not just the professionalism he was displaying on the field, but what he was saying in post-game interviews and beyond, et cetera, et cetera. And a week later, here we are. You find yourself, first of all, he stomped on Blount. It's clear he walked right into the scrum, and he put his foot on Blount, which is why Blount got up and shoved him. That's first of all. Secondly, you saw the low blow that he went to when he hit Martellus Bennett with. okay? He's just standing there, and you literally dive for his leg. Those are career-threatening plays. You can rip somebody's cartilage. You can tear their ACL. You're trying to do that on purpose? Come on now. You can't have that. You can't have that. So something has to be done. I think right now, Max, is the last thing I want to say. Somebody needs to look at Vontaze Burfict and ask him one simple question. Do you want to play in the NFL or not? Because they may not suspend him this time, but they are watching this dude, and they are not playing. They are not going to tolerate the kind of stuff that he gets himself into. I defended him at the beginning of the season. Remember that. You didn't. I can't defend this because you just fresh off of being suspended, and already you find yourself in the eye of the storm again. Makes no sense.
The reason I didn't defend him earlier in the season is because going into that playoff game against Pittsburgh last year on Sports Nation, Michelle and Marcellus and I were discussing Burfict and what are the odds he's going to do something. And my whole point, I turned to the camera and say, look, all eyes of the world are on Burfict. He's not going to do something stupid now. I mean, that's not when a guy misbehaves, whenever he knows the spotlight's on him.
And a week later.
And going into that, and then it was highlighted on TV. They need 14 yards to be in field goal range.
22 seconds left.
22 seconds left. It's an incomplete. He hands them 15 yards. Pac-Man Jones had no culpability there. Pac-Man Jones didn't do anything wrong in that game, but Vontaze Burfict sure did when everyone. That was the question heading into that game. The question, not about the quarterbacks, it was about Vontaze Burfict and his behavior. Would he blow it? And 14 yards, he hands him 15. You couldn't write in the script any better or worse. Okay, so that's when I'm like, okay, this guy has a problem. Stephen A., here's the issue here. Whether or not he gets suspended, he should be suspended 2 games. 1, for stomping on Blunt. The reason is, and Marcellus Wiley, who I worked with on the radio and TV, we saw each other 10 hours a day for 5 straight years plus. Used to talk about this all the time.
No wonder he's happy you're going.
he does look kind of happy now, doesn't he?
Nah. He misses you, bro. He misses you, bro.
So
right.
Marcellus used to talk all the time, a defensive end. He was an all-pro one year, a Pro Bowl player. When he was on the bottom of a pile, he grabbed someone's gut, twist it. You do all kinds of vicious things to each other on the bottom of a pile. And, hey, if the camera picks it up, if you get caught, that's something else. But you don't want to. That's not what happened. Burfict is not in the pile. He walks over and in plain sight of everyone stomps Blunt. 1 game. Okay, now we're talking about the Bennett hit. He went low, not high. That's true.
But it wasn't a play.
It wasn't. The ball wasn't coming to Bennett. The play was already over down the field.
And you had just finished arguing with him a few plays early.
So when I talk about Odell Beckham Jr., hey, Stephen A., it's impulse control. He took off his helmet. Those are relatively benign infractions, and I'm mad at Odell because he's actually hurting the team. But in Burfict's case, these are major infractions, injury-causing infractions, potentially career-ending infractions in Bennett's case, and it's hurting his team. That's a problem.
Vontaze Burfict had been fined about 4 previous times in 2015 alone, including the $50,000 fine a week before the Steelers game, Week 17, going into Week 17. So now you have this. Between James Thrash, Derek Brooks, okay, Troy Vincent, Merton Hanks, Lord knows who else, they have been on the phone or in person with this man on at least 15 separate occasions. 15! Enough's enough. Vontaze Burfict needs to ask himself one question. Do you want to play in the NFL or not?
And if he does, there's something he has to do.
Period. Do you want to play in the NFL or not? It's just that simple.
If the answer is yes, there's something he has to do. This is not a matter of just controlling his behavior. He has to, go see somebody because he's got a problem controlling himself.
He's a grown man. He needs to be accountable, but the coaches need to step it up, too. The coaches need to get their guys in check as well.
I think he needs to see a shrink or something. I don't know about a coach.